Nice weather today. Lots of people outside and tons of bikes for whatever reason riding around even trails here. And what's going on today? I guess this was expected. As you guys know, Transport Canada was going to introduce new regulations in terms of flying drones beyond visual line of sight. Currently, it's really over the top, for example, where you need to get things like an SFOC, even for really simple stuff. So this one here says, Minister of Transport announces Canada's first proposed drone safety regulations for beyond visual line of sight operations. Even way back when I read this, my first thought was, what does this mean? More tests, more registration fees, for example? It says here the proposed rules would require drones to be capable of detecting and avoiding other air traffic to ensure safety. They would also introduce a new class of pilot certification for lower risk BVLOS operations, including a requirement to meet a new drone pilot medical standard and eliminate the requirements to obtain a special flights operation certificate for lower risk BVLOS and medium-sized drone operations. These proposed changes would benefit Canadians as they would permit drone operations such as package delivery to remote communities, first responder operations, and natural resources and wildlife surveys to take place, among many other potential uses. Overall too, they say you have about 90 days to make comments about this, and their justification for this overall is essentially saying with the current system, like things like the SFOC and all that, people have to go through this tedious process. This will open it up, and as well, they kind of imply, well, it's a good thing because your investment in this will allow you to do more things, so you could in a sense make more money, which in my opinion is completely illogical from a safety point of view, if that's your argument, which I'll get into a bit later. So what are they proposing in terms of these changes and amendments? According to this, they want to introduce new requirements to reflect the increased risk of the two new categories of operation. So the first one is for medium drones, and it says that weigh above 25 kilograms up to and including 150 kilograms flying within VLOS near and over people in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace, and drones that weigh 250 grams up to and including 150 kilograms flying BVLOS in unpopulated and sparsely populated areas below 400 feet above ground level and in uncontrolled airspace. So completely separating, I guess, someone flying in a quote field, or let's just say in a busy city or something like that. So how about for a person like myself, for example, who went through the advanced pilot certification process? It's kind of interesting with the choices of words. It says here, expanding privileges for advanced pilot certificates. The existing Part 9 of the cards has created a strong safety baseline with no fatalities or serious injuries since coming into force in 2019. Over the past 3 years, TC has monitored the way the industry has developed, and after re-examining the knowledge required to obtain an advanced pilot certificate, TC has determined that the following operations may be added to the types of operations conducted by advanced pilot certificate holders without the requirements to obtain a new pilot certificate. It says VLOS operations with a medium-sized drone above 25 kilograms and up to including 150 kilograms, extended VLOS operations using a visual observer to scan the airspace, and sheltered operations which would allow the drone to be flown around an obstruction, example, a building, without the use of a visual observer. And why I say that's an interesting choice of words, because they say ever since I guess they introduced this, there's been no fatalities or serious injuries since this came into force. It's technically true, but that's kind of misleading, where I'd have to wonder, did you word it in this way so that you could avoid saying the fact that ever since you implemented this, I guess, law and all that, there's been 2 major crashes where the RCMP crashed their drones into manned aircraft and a helicopter, for example? That's a big deal, because for you to come out and say this, it's almost like implying, oh look, it works, it's great, but that would say otherwise. Fact is, that's the first time I've seen an actual tangible situation of people crashing drones into a manned aircraft in Canada. And for those who don't fly drones, think of it like this, where there was a regulator who thought it was a great idea to force everyone and everything that uses a road to take these tests that teach you things about railroad tracks in details, maybe how wildlife live for some reason. And ever since that, there's actually been more accidents like car crashes and all that. But then they come out here and say, well, there's been no serious injuries or fatalities. Wouldn't that sound weird to you? Like, hey, something's wrong if the accidents and stuff actually increased when you put this out there. So what exactly are these new categories that you would require certification for? It starts off with this one here, lower risk BVLOS. The amendments would introduce a new pilot certification process for lower risk BVLOS called Level 1 Complex Operations. So the prerequisite, according to this, is you first have to pass the Advanced Operation Online test. And it says, the pilot certification process. The pilot certification process would start with a pilot attending mandatory RPAS training, ground school, delivered by a school that meets the RPAS training provider requirements discussed in more details below. After successfully completing the ground school, the pilot would need to pass a new online multiple choice exam delivered through TC's DMP. The online exam would cover topics applicable to lower risk BVLOS operations, such as population density considerations, i.e. concentration of people in a geographic area, weather, how the drone operates, as well as in-depth flight planning, potential system failures, and technical knowledge related to the system connection links and detecting and avoiding hazards and other airspace users. So that's kind of interesting because before it was entirely your choice whether or not you wanted to attend, let's just say, one of these drone schools. You could actually just read the material yourself, go out and fly, and then afterwards it's just a matter of finding someone to do the flight review for you. Now granted, a lot of those people are part of a drone school and they sell courses, but you didn't have to actually legally take their courses or anything like that. Although an interesting thought with that is what a lot of places did from my observation is they actually made it so that you have to buy their course and read it, whatever it may be, $100 or something like that, before they'll even consider doing a flight review for you, which they charge again afterwards. So in many ways, people had to pay double regardless, and this one's kind of saying you're gonna have to do it for sure now, like 100%. And then this point, I was actually thinking about this before when it was initially announced. How is this sensible for an average individual that's flying literally, let's just say, a quote toy? It says once the pilot has passed the online exam, they would need to visit a provincially or territorially licensed physician who would make an assessment as to whether they are medically fit to fly based on the new RPAS medical standard. The physician would assess a pilot's awareness and ability to process information, mental health, and use of medications, drugs, and alcohol that can impair a pilot's judgment. If the pilot is assessed as meeting the standard, the physician would sign a declaration form developed by TC, and the pilot would need to confirm to TC through the DMP that this step has been completed. The medical standard is being proposed for BVLOS operations to mitigate the additional risks associated with the complex decision-making required to fly BVLOS by making sure pilots are mentally fit to fly. This doesn't make sense again for the average individual. Literally, there's no distinction between, for example, let's just say a quote toy, regardless of the fact that it's 250 grams or something like that. You're telling me someone has to go through the physician? Oh, I gotta make sure you are mentally capable and perfectly healthy to fly this toy around a tree, for example, because it's beyond your visual line of sight if you fly in a circle. That is crazy in my opinion. And I guess the final step, it says here, next the pilot would visit a flight reviewer to do an in-person flight test. At the beginning of the flight test, the flight reviewer would verify the pilot's identity and that the pilot has a physician's endorsement signature. The pilot would then need to pass a flight test which covers topics related to flying BVLOS, such as flight planning, doing a site survey, contingency procedures, takeoffs and landings, as well as cover technical requirements related to the aircraft and supporting systems. After these 4 steps are successfully completed, the pilot would be able to apply online for a pilot certificate for Level 1 Complex Operations in DMP, which would be automatically issued upon receipt of payment of the associated fees. And with that, according to this, you still need to stay in good standing. For example, with this physician's endorsement, it says you have to, I guess, maintain it every 5 years. people don't even do this for things like driving a car in your driver's license. So how does that make sense for this? Especially again, if people are just flying things like a toy and stuff for fun. And then for the next category, this would be for the extended visual line of sight and sheltered operations. So it says here, it'll be operations in uncontrolled airspace will continue to remain below 400 feet, and operations in controlled airspace will continue to require authorization from air traffic control. In addition, new requirements are being proposed to mitigate additional safety risks associated with larger drones, such as increasing the minimum distance from people not involved in the operation. This would reduce the risk of a larger drone causing injury to a person, and additional flight planning considerations such as weather and ensuring the drone does not fly during low visibility, affecting pilots' ability to maintain line of sight. Now there are other categories too, which is meant more for big business, like this RPAS operator certificate. And in general, in terms of the fee breakdown, you can see here in terms of the costs. For example, it was $5 and now they're proposing it go up to about $10. And you can see for things like the complex operations exam, $50. The certificate, for example, for level 1 complex operations, $125. Pre-validated declarations and stuff like that, $1,200, and the list goes on. This started with one of those, oh, it's just a couple of bucks, just do it. And surprise, surprise, it basically gets more and more. It seems like it never ends, correct? And then there's this part here where they kind of talk about, okay, why is it good for, let's just say, a recreational person and all that. It says here for recreational operators are expected to incur benefits associated with the proposed amendments. Benefits for commercial pilots were calculated by the extra profits that they would receive with the additional certificates. Recreational pilots are also expected to complete additional flights because of the proposed amendments. By using their new privileges under the advanced certificate or by obtaining the level 1 complex certificate, recreational pilots would be permitted to safely carry out flights that had previously been prohibited or required in SFOC. This would allow recreational pilots to change the way that certain activities, such as drone racing and aerial photography, would be conducted and may lead to further innovation through the allowance of regulations. An average value of a recreational day from existing literature was used as a proxy to calculate benefit to recreational operators. This value was calculated based on a willingness to pay methodology which captures the travel cost and was used to infer benefits associated with various recreational activities. The existing literature was used as a proxy because of the youth of the RPAS industry in Canada and lack of data from revealed preference studies on the willingness to pay specific to recreational drone activities. It is likely that the provided proxy value is a low estimate of the recreational benefits which operators would receive related to their new privileges. I'm trying to think about that, and if I'm kind of comprehending this correctly, they're kind of saying, well, look at the benefits of you doing this. It gives you more, quote, privilege, so that's why you should be happy. For example, maybe you can do a sporting event, I don't know, charge people money and all that, so it's good. You'll have a good return of investment. But in my opinion, that makes absolutely no sense from a safety point of view. Just the fact that someone could get, let's just say, I don't know, money by doing this, for example, like how they kind of say they calculated the benefit of a commercial operator where you'll be making more money, that means this has nothing to do with safety. It's about making profit, and that's not a good reason where your argument is this is all about saving lives and all that, whereas this sounds like it's all about money, and that's kind of the incentive to get people to kind of agree with it. You can make more money, you can do more things, we've given you your privilege back per se. That makes no sense in my opinion. This kind of reminds me early on when I started reading about this stuff because it didn't make sense logically and all that. It just sounded like people creating prejudice and discriminating laws. There were some people saying, oh, I should be happy that Transport Canada didn't just ban everything. They gave you back a little bit and so forth. I'm thinking, what is going on here? I don't follow politics and stuff usually, but isn't the concept of, let's just say, government and all that, is they're supposed to work for the people? If the mass majority of the people say they want to fly here and there, they think this is the safest way to do it while having an acceptable, I guess, level of risk versus being in fear every day of their lives, then shouldn't these guys be doing their job to implement that system? Not the other way around where they make something and say, here's a little bit of your privilege back. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. Can anybody counter that point? Are they not supposed to basically be representing real drone operators, for example, the mass majority of the people and all that? And as well, unfortunately, this is just another example where for everyone that said just follow it, it's a couple of bucks, basically people pushing fake gurus and lobbyists and all that. Look what happened, like during all these times. People just had to pay more money here, potentially have to do more tests and so forth. Various people, to my understanding, like those model flying clubs, they lost their rights for their fields and all that. So far from what I'm reading anyways, it doesn't make sense for, let's just say, the average recreational flyer with how most modern day people use the tech. For example, just flying for fun or taking a picture or video. I would be the example of it. Can someone argue why what I do is so, quote, dangerous? Yet I never crashed into a manned aircraft like the RCMP, for example. So if we're basing this on facts and logic, how do you justify this where this system is supposed to make things better when what you did initially didn't seem to do that? All it did was take people's rights away, and you're giving them back a little bit of their privilege, like that key word in this whole, I guess, report or whatever you want to call it. Overall, what I said remains true from what I see. There's way too much conflict of interest commercially in terms of these regulations and so forth. They're not based on safety. From the sounds of it, it just makes me wonder if it's kind of like that story yesterday. Are people just that easily bought out per se, where you offer them like a little bit of money or financial incentive, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's great, I'll get a good return of investment or something like that. I guarantee too, which is the unfortunate thing, where things just keep going in a circle, history repeats itself. When those, for example, model aircraft people lost their rights, I guarantee there were people scrambling to find a way to stay, quote, legal. That was probably the pitch for a lot of lobbyists and fake gurus and so forth. And so they started to do those courses and so forth. They pushed it afterwards, telling other people, this place is fantastic, do it more. Yet, in reality, these were the guys pushing for over-the-top regulations. I still remember one of those companies anyways. They tried to debate me, for example, saying, oh, we need this, it's dangerous and so forth. Or at the same time, they had no say in it in terms of the regulations the way they were. Yet I know this person in particular, they went out in the media bragging how they had a say in the test and all that. Like, give me a break. So will people actually ever learn in terms of exposing people like that versus always falling for the fake gurus and all that? It's like a politician. Just say the right things, try to, quote, look the part, and you can sucker a lot of people, I guess, huh? That's the unfortunate thing. And things just keep going in a circle until somebody eventually says, okay, no more. At this rate, I'm inclined to say any type of feedback and so forth you give is more for show and formality. It's almost like last time where it seemed like they kind of made up their mind already. So it makes you wonder what is necessary. I guess based on history, all this formality and stuff just simply doesn't work for the most part. What would people have to do to actually get changed based on things like logic and common sense, for example? Oh look, a vehicle was near a pedestrian there, a really huge one too. Should we start banging them all? Look, my life was at risk. That's how crazy it is in many ways when people have these over-the-top regulations for things like drones. There's no common sense or logic. Alright, see you guys later.